Hey everyone, we're back for the afternoon session. And while we wait for Chad's courtroom to come back, I'm showing live footage outside of courtroom in Massachusetts where people are screaming about the Karen Reed case. Not too much exciting going on outside of the courtroom. Hello, Sharon.
Someone told me that was Jen Coffindapper.
Oh. So Jen...
That's what I was told. She came here, stood right there, and took a picture of all three of you guys. And then she went up to the stairs and took a picture of the courthouse like this. Pink. That may have been her.
Harlot. Jennifer Kopfendorfer is the FBI agent that they all dislike.
Oh, I'd like to fucking interview that one.
I'm already bail money if that's her today.
Hey,
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure, you guys. Again, my pleasure.
Oh, yeah, Harlot. Is that right there?
All right, another juror dump. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
All right, they're back in
9.
They're back in court, so I'm going to take this off.
And who will be the next witness being called?
Colby Ryan?
Okay, and is the defense ready as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's please have the jurors brought in.
Okay, they've just called Colby Ryan to the stand. Brace yourselves. This may be emotional. Colby Ryan is Lori's eldest son. He was very, very close to Tylee and JJ, mostly Tylee. Yeah. Oh boy. That kid has been through a hell of a lot, man. So I guess that's why we did see him walking into court today. Colby really did try to get he really did try to get Lori and Chad to come forth before they did. He made a video, a YouTube video, while the kids were still missing and while Chad and Lori were in Hawaii and nobody knew where they were. He made a video and put it on YouTube and pleaded with her. And it gave an indication of what was going on with their relationship, that he wasn't really brought in.
Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record on case CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. We just completed the lunch recess and the state continues with its case in chief. The state may call its next witness.
The state calls Colby Ryan.
Hey, Meles. Hey, Rhodes. Hello, everybody coming in.
Solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
Colby has a lot to testify about. He went to Lori's house. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, now that the witness has been sworn, I'll just inquire, Mr. Ryan, these trial proceedings have been streamed live on the court's YouTube channel and open for public access. Have you reviewed or watched any of this testimony that's taken place?
No.
Oh, and actually,
I was just going to note, Your Honor, Mr. Ryan is not subject to the exclusionary warrant.
I appreciate you
exclusionary
pointing that
order.
out, Mr. Wood. That's correct. So as a statutorily definite, with the definition here, he would not be subject to that. So disregard my inquiry. Mr. Wood, you can go ahead and proceed.
And before I do, Your Honor, may I be handed States Exhibits 6 and 4?
Yes.
I hope he's doing better too. Test Mac. He looks good. At least from what I can tell from here. But he went to Lori's house in the afternoon after Charles was killed, and he was absolutely
Good afternoon,
shocked
Mr. Ryan.
Good afternoon.
about the
Can
part.
you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Yes. Colby Ryan, Ryan.
Mr. Ryan, who is your mother?
Lori Vallow.
How many siblings do you have?
4.
Okay. Can you tell us their names?
Cole, Zach, Tylee, and JJ.
And Cole and Zach, what is your specific relationship or relation to them?
They're my stepbrothers.
Who was their father?
Charles Vallow.
Your Honor, may I publish?
Yes, that's an admitted exhibit, correct?
Yes, this is States Exhibit 6.
Okay. Yes, you may.
Y'all, this is one of those witnesses that immediately after he starts talking, I start feeling the pressure of tears.
Mr. Ryan, do you recognize that individual?
Yes.
Who is that?
That's my sister Tylee.
He's having to brace himself. It's so hard.
What is your specific relation to Tylee?
She's my half sister on my mom's side.
So you share a mother.
Mhm.
Your Honor, may I publish States Exhibit 4?
Yes.
It's probably going to be a picture of JJ.
Mr. Ryan, do you recognize that individual?
Yes.
And if you need a drink of water, I don't know if there's tissues up there.
Yeah. I'm good.
Give him some tissues,
Who is that?
That is my brother JJ.
man.
And what is your specific relation to JJ?
He is my adopted brother.
Do you recall when JJ was adopted?
Yes.
Do you know who Charles Vallow was?
Yes.
Who was he?
He was my stepfather.
And when you say stepfather, how was he your stepfather?
He married my mom.
How long was he married to your mom?
Over 10 years.
All right. And what was your relationship like with Mr. Vallow?
He was my dad. It was good.
So fair to say you were close with him?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you recall when Mr. Vallow passed away?
Yes.
Or Charles Vallow? If I say Charles, we understand who we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Do you recall when he passed away?
Yes.
When was that?
July 11th, 2019.
How did you hear about him passing away?
My mom called me and told me that he had had a heart attack.
And do you remember about what time of day that was?
between like 1 and 3 o'clock, something in the afternoon.
in the afternoon?
Mhm.
Did you have any reason to not believe her that that's how he passed away?
No,
Did you have any occasion to go over and to your mother's house that day?
yes,
And where was that house located?
in Gilbert, Arizona.
Do you know approximately what time you went over?
And I got off at work at 7, so around 7:30, 7:45.
Uh, what happened? What was the first thing you saw when you got there?
Tylee opened the door and hugged me, and she was crying. And then I saw my uncle Alex sitting on the couch with a bandage around his head. And then I saw my mom in the backyard, and that was it.
Did you go into the house?
Yes.
Did you see your brother JJ there?
No.
Did you speak with Alex Cox at all that night?
Yes.
What? How did that conversation go? What did he say to you?
Objection, hearsay.
Statement of a co-conspirator, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Tell us about the conversation with Alex Cox. Well, and before we do that, what was your relation to Alex Cox?
He was my uncle.
And you testified you saw him with something white wrapped around his head.
Yes.
Did you speak to him at all that night?
I asked him what was on his head, and he said that Charles had hit him in the head with a bat and that he had shot him in self-defense.
And is that how you learned how your stepdad died?
Yes.
Did he tell you anything else about that altercation?
No.
And did you ever have any other occasion to speak to him about that altercation?
No.
You said you saw your mother that night. And what was her demeanor?
Calm. Unrattled.
What did you think of that?
I thought it was crazy. So I was freaking out,
It's
and she
disturbing.
seemed to not care.
And did you speak to your mother that night about how Charles had actually died?
Yes.
How did that conversation go?
She told me there was a fight and ran through it very quickly. And it was just in shock. I can't remember exactly what she said, but she just basically gave me a very quick version of the story.
Did she tell you why she had lied to you earlier?
No,
Do you remember if you asked her?
I don't remember.
Did you ever speak with Lori Vallow about Charles Vallow's life insurance policy?
Yes.
When was, do you know if that happened multiple times?
I know she'd mentioned it growing up. She talked to us about what would happen if either one of them, something happened to them, what would happen. I think it was a few weeks later that she brought up that she was not going to receive any of the money from Charles.
Okay, let's just take a quick step back. When you say a few weeks later, what do you mean a few weeks later?
After Charles was murdered.
And she told you then that she was not going to receive that money.
Yes.
From that conversation, was it your understanding that she had been expecting to receive that money?
Yes.
And okay. When Charles was alive, did you ever have occasion to speak with Lori Vallow about her and Charles's finances?
Yes.
Was that something that came up often?
Yes.
About how often, to the best of your recollection?
I would say maybe monthly,
Okay.
once a month.
And what was the general nature of those conversations?
From what I understood, Charles would work and then receive like a bigger amount of money, and then it would kind of run out, and then they'd make another bigger amount, and then it would run out. So it's kind of the nature of the conversation would be that they were running low on money, something to that degree.
And was that a common theme then?
Mhm.
And just to be clear, the common theme that they were running out of money.
Yes.
Do you know who Tylee Ryan's father was?
Yes.
Who was that?
Joseph Ryan.
And I know that you and Joseph Ryan have the same last name.
Yes.
Was he your biological father?
No.
But did you take his last name?
Yes.
And do you know if Mr. Ryan is alive or deceased?
He's deceased.
And do you recall when that happened?
Summer of 2018, I think. Something around that time.
You don't remember the exact date?
No.
And were you aware if Tylee Ryan received Social Security benefits after Joe Ryan passed away?
Yes.
How did you learn that?
My mom told me that she would be receiving benefits.
And do you know if she received that monthly?
Yes.
Did you ever receive money from Tylee Ryan?
Yes.
How would that usually happen?
Venmo. She would Venmo me.
Would you ever ask her for some money?
I did, yes.
And about how often would that happen?
Maybe I could recall asking Tylee specifically a couple times. I would mostly ask my mom, and Tylee would be the middleman between those transactions. So I'd ask my mom, and she would tell Tylee to send the money.
Speaking of that, to your knowledge, did Lori Vallow ever send you money by sending it to Tylee, who would then Venmo it to you?
Yes.
And how did you know that?
I would ask my mom, and then she said, okay, Tylee will send it over to you.
Do you recall the last time you saw Tylee Ryan?
Yes.
When was that?
It's August 30th.
And where was that?
It was outside of my work in the parking lot.
Is that in Arizona?
It was in Mesa, Arizona, outside of a gym.
And what was the nature of that visit?
My mom was very vague and said that they were leaving. She brought Tylee and JJ, and Tylee was crying and didn't say anything really. And I hugged JJ, and my mom said that they'd be back in a few weeks to visit.
Did she tell you where she was going?
No.
Do you recall if you asked?
I did ask initially.
But she
Man,
wouldn't tell you?
That's
No.
so cold, man. Don't even tell your kid where you're going with his siblings.
Did you receive or did you exchange text messages with Tylee Ryan on September 8th of 2019?
Yes.
What was the nature of that text exchange?
I think I had asked her to send money. And I think we had talked earlier that day a little bit. I didn't talk to her directly, but I had heard her voice, and they said that they were on a trip. And I think I'd asked her for money. I think that's what it was.
Okay. And did she respond? Do you recall?
Yes.
What did she respond?
I don't remember what she said exactly. I remember her last text that she said was just I love you and I love the girls.
And you said you heard her voice earlier that day. How did you hear her voice?
She was in the background of my conversation with my mom.
Right. And did your mom tell you where they were?
She said they're at Yellowstone Park.
I know, right, Chopper? And hey,
Did you ever have a conversation with Lori Vallow after Charles's death about Tylee's Social Security money?
Yes.
What was the nature of that conversation?
So if I recall, she said that Tylee's money was not going to be everybody's money since she
Judge,
didn't have
can I
it.
have some foundation as to what time, date, place this discussion took place?
So foundation objection, Mr. Wood?
Your Honor, I'll ask a few more questions.
Thank you.
Do you recall approximately when that conversation took place?
I don't.
Okay. Was it in person?
I don't recall. I think it was on the phone, maybe.
But it was after Charles's death.
Yes.
And just to be clear, you don't recall the exact date.
No, I don't remember.
What was the nature of that conversation about Tylee's money?
Judge, again, foundation.
Overruled.
You can answer the question.
Yeah. The initial question I had is, how are you going to take care of Tylee and JJ now? And I knew that she wasn't going to be receiving the money. So she said, we're going to supplement some Tylee's money for now. And I'm going to go work. That was what she said. And that was basically the nature. But she said, we're going to start using Tylee's money to make it through. And I think that I don't know if they were receiving anything for JJ, but that was the nature of the conversation.
Okay. So you don't recall if she mentioned JJ receiving Social Security?
I don't
funds?
remember, but I know about it. I just don't remember if she said that.
Okay. And do you recall if she said anything about her receiving Social Security benefits after Charles died?
No.
The last time you saw Tylee, was that also the last time you saw JJ? And I think you said that was September or August 30th of 2019.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about November 27th, 2019.
Okay.
Were you contacted by the Gilbert police on November 27th of 2019?
Yes.
What was the purpose of that contact?
They came to our door looking for Tylee and I think JJ as well. I specifically remember them asking about Tylee first.
And what did you tell them?
I said I didn't know where they were.
Do you recall if you told them about the last time you had seen them?
I think so. I think so.
At that time, had you been concerned about Tylee?
Yes.
Why is that?
Our conversations were not normal. The way her dialect and her text, the way she spoke wasn't matching up. And I had texted her for her birthday and just things of that nature. Just wasn't getting calls, wasn't getting any contact in a normal way, and was always avoided. So I thought maybe she was upset with me, but I just didn't want to pressure her because I know she'd been through a lot.
And so you mentioned text messages. Was there a change in those messages?
Yes.
How so?
Just little things like if you capitalize the letter I in periods and emojis, just things like that. Things just didn't sound right. And it just felt off when I was receiving those texts.
Do you recall the last time you spoke with her on the phone?
The last time I directly spoke with Tylee was on the 30th with JJ on FaceTime. So the same day that I saw them.
So you FaceTimed with them later that day?
Yes.
And then you never spoke with her again on the phone? But going back to those text messages, Did you keep receiving text messages throughout September of 2019?
Yes.
And are those the messages that you felt were different?
Yes.
Did you respond to those messages?
Yes.
After the beginning of September, did you continue to receive money from Tylee's Venmo?
I think so.
Do you recall how often?
I think maybe a couple more times. So maybe 2 or 3.
And did you receive any more money from Lori Vallow?
Yes.
And how would she send that?
So she started sending money after I had not heard from her for since that day. She started sending money on Cash App. I think she made a separate account and just tried to send money, and it kept denying it because it was a new account. I think it was all through Cash App at that point at just random times.
Okay. And was it in response to you asking for money, or was it just sent? Do you recall?
It was just sent.
After Charles Vallow died, did you ever speak with your mom about her getting married again?
Yes.
And do you remember when that conversation was?
Maybe a few weeks after
After he passed away?
after he was gone. Yes.
What did she tell you about that?
It wasn't really a conversation. She just said a one-off thing like, I'll be married again soon. And I disregarded her and told her that I think that's crazy, or maybe she's talking about in the next life. It wasn't a real conversation. It was just a comment she made, and I completely dismissed what she said.
So she didn't give you any details about who she was marrying,
No,
when she was getting married?
No.
Other than soon?
just soon. Yeah.
Did your mom ever mention the name Chad Daybell to you?
I don't think so. No. I know she was becoming spiritual, if you want to call it that, for a long time, but she doesn't. I only knew Melanie. I didn't know anybody else that she was spending a ton of time with in a
And when you say Melanie, which Melanie? are you-
Melanie Gibb.
Okay.
Yes.
Did you contact your mother after November 27th when you were contacted by the Gilbert police?
I immediately contacted her after they left.
And what did you say to her?
I asked her what is going on. Why are the cops asking me where Tylee and JJ are? And she said, I think she asked me, like, what did they ask? And I said, they asked for Tylee and JJ. And I said, what's going on? And she just proceeded to say, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about anything. And then she's like, that's it. Like, I got it.
At that point, did you know where your mother was?
No.
So she had never told you where she was?
No, we speculated based off of the Yellowstone thing, but I didn't have an idea where she actually was.
And you didn't know she was in Rexburg, Idaho?
No.
And she never told you that?
No.
Did you try to contact your mother on Thanksgiving?
Yes.
Did she respond to you?
No.
Did you ever have contact after that with your mother before she was arrested?
I think she sent an email not too long, maybe within a couple of weeks. And the nature of the email was, everything's fine. Everything's going to be okay. Don't worry about me. I've got Jesus on my side, blah, blah, blah. But basically just saying, it's okay. I've got things handled.
Yeah,
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
me too.
All
Test
right,
map.
thank you, Mr. Wood. Cross-examination, Mr. Pryor.
Pryor, you better not be a jerk.
Good afternoon. Can you tell me how old you are?
28.
Oh my gosh, he's younger than I thought.
You mentioned a number of times that you were receiving money from Tylee and Lori. Is that right?
Mhm.
And 2018, 2019.
Yes.
Sound about right?
Yeah.
4, 5, 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Financially, is there a reason why they were sending you money?
We were just a young family and I just needed help and I was asking my mom for help.
What's
You were a young family
relevant?
with children of your own?
Yes.
Okay, and just difficulty supporting yourself?
Yeah.
So your sister Tylee was helping out,
Sometimes, yeah.
and that was consistent with her character, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Very caring person,
Very.
very kind person.
Yep.
She was, in many ways, more of a mother figure to JJ than Lori was. Would you agree with that?
I think she was his big sister.
Very caring of JJ, very, very protective of JJ. Would you agree with that?
She loved him. Yeah.
And she understood him better than almost anybody, correct?
Sure.
He had tremendous challenges as a young autistic, 7-year-old autistic child, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of all your siblings, you would probably say that Tylee was probably the kindest, the gentlest, and the most understanding of JJ. Would that be fair?
Sure.
Now, you mentioned that Lori called you to let you know that Charles had died.
Yes.
She didn't tell you that Alex gunned her down in the house, right?
No.
She lied to you,
Yes.
said it was a heart attack.
Yes.
So you're Lori's son, natural son, right?
Yes.
So Lori Vallow lied to her son the first time, saying that Charles died of a heart attack, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of lying in a lot of places.
And Lori lied a lot to you, right?
Other people too. Were. Yeah.
But
Way to
Lori
get
lied
it
a
in there,
lot to you.
Colby.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
And then you mentioned the name Melanie Gibb.
Mm-hmm.
Was Melanie Gibb in on this lying to you as well about covering things up?
I didn't speak to Melanie Gibb.
Okay.
Pryor's like,
But Lori and
"Yeah."
Lori and Melanie were the best of friends, right?
You could say that.
And Lori met Melanie because Melanie was teaching classes about religion and about various religious topics, and Lori gained an interest in that, and that's how that friendship started, correct?
I'm not exactly sure. She was at our Christmas party one time and then she was there as her friend. So I didn't know what their exact connection was.
When was that Christmas party?
2018.
Okay. And the two of them were together, and it was abundantly clear that the two of them were very, very close friends, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Come on, Pryor. We don't need your testimony.
At the time that your mother notified you, you were at work, is that right?
Yes.
So did you get that message while you were actually working, or was it over a break, or how did that transpire?
So I was in the middle of my workday and she called me and then I went over there after work
And where were you working at that time?
at Anytime Fitness.
Okay. And so you took a break. Do you need to take a break?
No, you're good.
Okay. You took a break, and your mother called you or texted you and said there was a heart attack.
Yes.
No mention of self-defense.
No.
No mention that Alex shot Charles in self-defense, right?
No.
She was clearly lying to her son, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the fight that occurred between Charles and Alex, Tylee was there, and she was implicated in that, correct?
Yes.
And she was present for that fight and that entire altercation, from what you understand, correct?
Objection, states facts not in evidence.
Overruled.
Correct?
From what I understand, yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that your father isn't Joseph Ryan, correct?
No.
But are you aware that your mother in 2018 received a sizable life insurance policy from Joseph Ryan?
I am now, yes.
You are now, like right now?
I mean, I heard that later on, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're aware that financially, Lori Vallow had a significant amount of money as of middle or late of 2018, correct?
Yes.
Okay. During this time that there was discussion with Charles about financing, was it Charles Vallow who was the primary financer of the family's expenses?
Yes.
Your mother chose not to work.
She worked, I think, in the beginning, and then I think he just took over. I'm not sure. I was a child.
Okay, so when there was financial issues, it was your mother putting this all on Charles to provide for the family. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. And you already previously mentioned that you communicate with Tylee at least like once a month. Is that fair, or was it more frequently than that?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
You communicated with Tylee at least once a month. Was that fair?
Growing up, or
Well,
you
in
mean?
the last couple of years.
Yeah,
Okay,
More
and
than
the manner that you would communicate was by text message.
primarily.
Okay. And how often with JJ would you communicate with JJ?
I mean, it really depends. Tylee and I would see them more often, so I didn't have much time for them not being around.
Okay.
So before that, it wasn't once a month. It was a lot more frequent. They
Right.
lived in the same place, and I would go see them.
Okay. And when you communicated with Tylee, or excuse me, when you communicated with JJ, it was always Tylee there, right? Usually?
Yeah.
Not Lori.
She would be there too.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you saw Tylee on August 30th in Mesa, Arizona. That was the last time you saw them. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you had mentioned that Tylee was obviously upset.
Yes.
Did you have any prior information that Tylee just did not want to go to Idaho?
No, because I didn't know she was going to Idaho.
Okay. So she was obviously upset about something.
Yeah.
And it was the day that they were packing up to leave to go to Idaho. Is that right?
Yes.
And prior to that time, there was no indication that Tylee was upset about anything else. Is that right?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay, that's fair. Do you remember that? And from August 30th, you then had a FaceTime call with both Tylee and JJ later that afternoon, later that evening.
Mhm.
Do you know about what time that was?
Probably when I got home, so anywhere between 7 to 8 p.m.
Okay, and you don't know where they were at that point, though, right?
They were back at the house.
In Gilbert?
Yes.
Okay. They hadn't left, but they were preparing to leave.
They were leaving in the morning, from what I
Was-
understood.
Was Tylee still upset about the fact that she was leaving for Idaho?
Not on the phone call, no.
Okay. Now on the
Hello, Great Dane Mom. Yep.
back in late November, you had then had an occasion to talk with your mother. Is that right? After the Gilbert police spoke with you?
Yes.
And again, your mother lied to you again.
Yes.
Was Melanie Gibb there
Where?
on the phone? Any indication that Melanie Gibb was there listening in on the phone call?
No.
You don't know whether she was or not, or you just don't know?
I have no idea if she was there.
Okay. Now, your mother's a strong personality, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
She's not someone that people can tell her what to do. Would you agree with that?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So you think she could be influenced very easily, right?
That's a big gap between not influential and influential.
Okay, but you would agree that your mother is one to speak her opinion when she has an opinion about a subject, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I agree, Tess Mac.
Did you have an occasion to ever interact or observe the way your mother talks to her friends? Let's say Melanie Gibb, how she interacts with someone like Melanie Gibb?
Yes.
And that sort of interaction between them, your mother was a wallflower, or did she tend to speak her opinion when she spoke with her good friend Melanie Gibb?
Can you define wildflower?
Wallflower, someone very passive who wouldn't argue, someone who would just accept the way things are.
She did not like confrontation.
Okay.
She avoided it. So take that for what it is. I don't know.
Okay. So if getting in a discussion with Melanie Gibb, she would avoid confrontation. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did she ever tell you in late November, after the police called you, that JJ and Tylee were with Melanie Gibb?
No.
Judge, I think that's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pryor. Can we redirect?
Just briefly.
I'm
Right.
relieved that that didn't have to be too much more emotional for him than it already is. This probably won't be too bad here.
You were just
Pryor was
asked
a fire.
about
I love
kind of
that.
your mother's personality,
Mm-hmm.
whether she was a wallflower. And you said that you believed your mom had a strong personality. But that
Judge,
she,
I'm going to object. I don't recall that testimony.
Overruled.
I think
but you said you thought your mom could be influenced.
Yes.
we can agree, Chopper.
Earlier, you testified that your mom had become more religious over the years. And you were asked if she could be influenced.
Yes.
Do you believe your mother was influenced by Chad Daybell?
Objection, Judge.
Grounds.
Ground.
It's speculation. There's no foundation to base what he's basing this on.
It's a question of belief. It's overruled.
Yeah.
100%. I think she could be influenced.
Yeah.
Okay, and my question was, do you believe she was influenced by Chad Daybell?
Judge, again, I'm going to object. Foundation, speculation.
Overruled.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Boom.
All right, on that very last point, if you'd like, Mr. Pryor, recross. If not, we'll be concluded with the witness. And just limited to that last line of questioning you objected on, I'll allow recross.
Your Honor, I would just note, I think that question was directly in line with his cross.
Understood. I'll allow the recross.
Judge, am I permitted to go forward?
Yes, but only on that last question or two.
Now, in August of 2018, or August of 2000, excuse me, August of 2019, you had never heard of Chad Daybell, is that right?
Correct.
And you testified previously that your mother said, and please let me get to the quote. And it was a few weeks after Charles passed away, and Charles passed away in July of 2019, right? You said, I will be married again soon, but she didn't specify who she was talking about, right?
Correct.
And at that point in July of 2019, you didn't know very much about Chad Daybell either, did you?
No.
Had never even heard the name, right?
No.
And then in August, almost September of 2019, correct?
Yeah.
You had never heard of Chad Daybell. You didn't even know where or why they were going to Idaho, did you?
No.
And then we fast forward to November, 2 months later, within 60 days, you have a conversation with your mother about where's JJ, correct? And at that point, you'd never heard or mentioned the name Chad Daybell. Is that right?
Correct.
And then subsequent to that, you mentioned the fact that your mother, there was a call and a communication where your mother had been locked up. And at that point, you had a confrontation call with her. And at that point, you never heard about Chad Daybell, correct?
No, in December of 2019, there was a release, and that's how we found out that she was married
Okay,
and that the kids were missing, and that's how we found out.
okay. So after December of 2019, after everything started processing, that's when you drew this conclusion that Chad Daybell must be influencing her. It wasn't anything up until December of 2019. Is that fair?
I mean, they ran away together.
Well,
So
I understand that, but
Yeah.
prior to December of 2019, to your knowledge, Chad Daybell wasn't even in the picture. Is that right?
correct.
Yeah, I have nothing else, Judge. Thank you.
All right. All right, that'll conclude the testimony then of this witness. Is the witness going to be recalled at any point, Mr. Wood?
Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes.
Man. Me too, Patricia. I have an immense amount of sympathy for this kid. He's only 28 years old. Gosh, for some reason, I don't know why. It just never locked into my brain his age. So that means when this all happened, he was 24-ish, 24, 25. Oh my God, so young. And it is why you need a death penalty certified attorney. I'm relieved that this didn't have to be a super harrowing time on the stand.
All right, that'll conclude the testimony of Mr. Ryan then. Mr. Ryan, you potentially may be recalled at some point in this case. If so, you'll be contacted either by the state or the defense. Otherwise, you are permitted to step down, and that concludes your testimony for today.
I mean, I'm relieved it's over for him today. I wish they would just let him go for this trial. But the thing is that it's not over for him because Lori's trial in Arizona is coming up, and he'll definitely be a witness there.
Any further witness to call this afternoon? Well, I should say we've still got time. So who will the state be calling next, assuming we've got one?
Your Honor, the state will be calling David Warwick.
Very well.
Oh boy, David Warwick. Okay. For those of you who are not aware, David Warwick is Melanie Gibbs' husband, who she no longer works with. I'm sorry, who she no longer lives with. He's in Utah. She's in Arizona. David was present with Melanie at Lori's apartment and witnessed Alex bringing JJ in on his shoulder.
I swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
All right, now that the witness has been sworn, let me just inquire, Mr. Warwick, have you viewed or listened in on any of the testimony that's taken place in this trial since it started?
No,
All right, have you discussed your testimony with anyone else?
no.
Very well. Mr. Wixom, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Warwick, will you please state your full name for the record and spell it? David Dale Warwick. Will you spell it for the reporter, please? Oh, spell it. Sorry. DAVIDDALEWARWICK. Thank you. And Mr. Warwick, where do you live? Pleasant Grove, Utah.
What do you do for a living?
A general contractor.
I'm going to ask you some questions, drawing your attention back to
roughly 5 years ago. Are you familiar with the name Chad Daybell?
Yes.
How are you familiar with his name?
Uh, I think since 2012, if I recall.
When did you first become familiar, or how did you first become familiar with his name?
There was a book that he had done done a book with Julie Rowe. And I just knew that he was the author or publisher of that.
At any point in time, did you have any contact with Mr. Daybell?
At that time,
At any point in time?
yes.
When did you first have contact with him?
He reached out to me to wanting to do a book with me.
Do you recall approximately when that occurred?
2015 is what I'm thinking that was.
How did he reach out to you?
He's communicated. He's called me, he's texted me and emailed me, and I just can't remember which one was first.
Had you ever initiated any of that contact?
No,
What was your reaction to his request that you write a book?
I just said I needed to think about it, and because of the content, I needed approval from above.
So did you decide ultimately to write a book for him?
No,
After that initial contact, however it came, did he continue to reach out to you to request this?
yes,
How often did he reach out to you?
probably 3 or 4 times over a year.
How did he do that?
Text and email mainly. I think we only had 1 phone call.
What was your reaction to those continued requests?
I just said no.
At any point in time, did you ever have any personal contact with Mr. Daybell?
Yes.
When do you recall that first happening?
The first time was at a meeting in Rigby, Idaho.
And tell the jury about this meeting. What was the meeting?
It's they were having a meeting about priesthood power and dealing with the darkness of this world and evil.
Who was having the meeting?
John Miller.
And approximately when did this meeting occur?
If I remember right, it was fall of 2015.
And why did you have occasion to attend that meeting?
Because John Miller reached out to me,
Did you
asked me to come.
know Mr. Miller before this?
I did not.
Did you have any understanding why Mr. Miller had reached out to you?
Yes, I had done a few firesides, and anyway, so people got to know me through others that way, and so he reached out to me thinking that I would be interested in this.
I think you indicated that this meeting occurred in Rigby, Idaho.
Yes.
And where in Rigby was this meeting?
Where?
Mhm.
It was at his home.
Do you recall who all was in attendance at the meeting?
Not everybody. Most of the people I didn't know.
Who do you recall and was at the meeting?
John Miller, Larry Hilton, Tom Harrison, Bob Walker, Hector Sosa. Now, some of these guys I met because we carpooled up, so that's why I remember their names. But then the others that were there, that's where I met Chad.
When you were at this meeting, did you have any occasion to have a conversation with Chad?
Yes.
Can you explain to the jury what was the conversation about and how did that come to be?
He just came up and said that he was going to go to his house, and he wanted me to come over. He said Julie Rowe and a few of her associates were coming, and they actually showed up at this meeting too. And anyway, I said, no, I'm not here. I'm here for this meeting. And I didn't want to go. I wanted to stay because I was asked to be at this meeting by the host. So
What was Chad specifically asking of you?
He just asked me to come with him.
And did you eventually do that?
Yeah, so he went and talked to John Miller, and they were having a lunch break. And John said, "Yeah, go ahead and go. It'll be okay. Just, we can just resume when you get back."
At that point, did you want to go?
No, I didn't, but there was some curiosity to what's going on. So, but I just went out of respect.
And where did you go?
We went to Chad's home
Where was his home located?
in Rexburg.
What did you do at his home?
We walked around his property, and this is the first time I had met Julie Rowe also. And basically she was helped telling him how the property was to be laid out and organized for tents to be set up and a building to be built for preparations.
Why did Julie Roll explain this information? What was her basis of understanding?
My understanding is she had a vision, or she was having visions. I wasn't informed on the details of what was going on. It was more of a meet and get acquainted.
Did you recall meeting anybody else at that meeting besides Ms. Rowe? Let me withdraw that and be clear. While at Chad's property, do you recall meeting anybody else besides being there with Chad and Ms. Rowe?
Yeah, there were several other men there, but I don't recall their names.
Did you ever have occasion to meet Chad's wife?
Yes,
And who was that you met?
Tammy.
When did you meet Tammy?
When we were in their living room, Chad had her come out and introduced us to his wife.
Was that at the same meeting that you were there with Julie Roll that Chad had brought you to?
Yes.
Did Tammy participate in the conversation or walking around the property?
No, she didn't.
Any understanding why she did not do that?
I just didn't feel like she was interested, but that was just my feelings.
How did that meeting eventually end?
When we got done walking around the property, we just left and went back to John Miller's.
Did you have any other interaction with Chad at that point, at that meeting?
No.
Do you recall any other occasions that you met Chad personally after that meeting?
Yes.
When's the next time that you recall having met with him personally?
There was a conference in Brigham City, Utah that I was asked to speak at, and Chad was there.
To the best you can recall, approximately when was that conference?
2017 is my guess. That's the best that'd be my guess. I don't remember exactly.
But it was after your meeting at John Miller's house?
Yes.
What was your interaction with Chad at that conference?
We just talked. I saw him over there at his booth when we had a break, and I went and just talked with him for a few minutes.
Anything of note in the conversation?
No.
Did you have any impressions at that point of Chad's just general nature and his demeanor?
No, he's just, Chad's always been very, very kind, very meek.
Anything else about the way he conducted himself or interacted with people at that point in time?
No.
When's the next time that you recall seeing Chad in person?
At Lori Bowell's house in Chandler, Arizona.
And when did that happen?
August of 2019.
What was your occasion for being at that meeting?
Lori, I was with Melanie, and we were doing a couple of firesides in Arizona. And Lori called when we were coming back down from the northern Arizona and said, "Hey, We got some friends here. We'd like you, they wanted her to bring me over to meet me. So they said they were just having like a luncheon. You know, she had prepared food and just asked us to come and stop by.
When you say Melanie, are we speaking of your spouse?
Yes.
And who is your wife, just to clarify for the jury?
Who's what?
Who is your wife? What's Melanie?
Yeah.
What was Melanie's last name at the time?
Oh, sorry, Gibb. Sorry.
And you're still married?
Yes.
So who do you recall being at that luncheon or that meeting at Lori's house?
Chad, Lori, Melanie Boudreaux, I think was her name. Alex Cox, Zalima, and then there was a lady there named Julie.
Was it the same Julie Rowe?
No.
During that meeting, was there any conversation that occurred?
Yeah, it was sitting around a table and eating food, and conversation was happening while we were eating.
Anything else? What was the general subject of the conversation while you were at the meeting?
That they were talking about the 144,000 and about the gathering of the 144,000. And
I'm going to pause you there for the jury's sake. When you say they were talking about it, who was talking about the 144,000?
Chad and Lori, but they were all talking about it. It was not really a formal meeting. It was kind of a lot of conversation. And I was just picking up on what they were talking about.
To the best you can recall, what things do you remember Chad or Lori saying about the 144,000?
That they were responsible to gather them. It was their call.
Now, were these things that just one of them was saying? Let me withdraw that. Was Chad saying these things?
I don't remember which one was saying it.
But one of the two?
I would say it was one of the two because they were the host of this meeting.
Any reason to think that they both weren't embracing or believing whatever it is that they were talking about?
Yeah. Yes.
Anything else that came up in that conversation besides the 144,000?
They talked about they all have these special gifts they were given, and what they were gonna. They talked about they had multiple lives and done things in previous lives.
When you talk about these special gifts, did they elaborate at all on these special gifts?
It was yeah, there was. I just remember a couple. One was had power over the elements of the earth and had to be in certain places a certain time to facilitate whatever God was doing.
Judge, I hate to interrupt, but could I have some foundation as to exactly which one of these guests was that talking about that?
Mr. Wixom.
Thank you. Awesome question, Judge. So you just mentioned this gift about power over the elements. Do you recall for the jury, who was it at this meeting that had those types of powers?
Zalima.
Were there any other special powers that were mentioned at the meeting?
And yeah, that I can recall, no. I remember Alex was he either knew or he was told that he was the angel that came to stop Laman and Lemuel when Nephi was being smitten.
Is that an LDS reference?
Yes.
What did Alex think about that or say about that particular belief?
He felt good because he was doing something good. He felt good that he was a good guy.
And during that meeting, did Chad ever discuss with you any role that he might want you to have in this gathering?
At that time, I don't think he did. I think it was for me just to get acquainted.
Did you have any discussions with him about your reaction to some of those things that were being taught?
Yes.
What discussion did you have with him about that?
but that if somebody's going to have the position to call the 144,000, that I felt like that would be a prophet of God that would have that responsibility.
Is it fair to say that you didn't believe that Chad was a prophet of God at that point,
No,
at any point?
no.
So did you tend to agree with some of those teachings that Chad was engaging in that day?
Judge, I'm going to object to the characterization.
I can respond.
Oh, it's overruled. Go ahead.
Did you have any disagreement? I'm sorry, let me withdraw that. You can ask the question if you remember what it was.
I'm sorry.
I'll re-ask it. Did you agree or disagree generally with the things that Chad and others were teaching at that meeting?
I disagreed.
Do you remember specifically, besides the issue of a prophet, anything else that you disagreed with?
Yeah, they did. They talked about Satan having power to push people out of their bodies and taking possession of them. And then the person's spirit would be stuck in limbo. They couldn't go forward because the body was still alive.
Did you discuss that teaching with Chad at all?
Yeah, I just said Satan was never allowed that power because that's something he wanted to do from the beginning. And God put a boundary there so that he could not do that.
So you didn't believe these things, is that
No.
fair? Okay. During that meeting, did you notice anything about the way Chad and Lori interacted with one another?
They seemed really close. I mean, they were, they were really friendly with one another.
When you said really close and friendly, could you describe that more for the jury?
Well, I just noticed when Lori brought the food to the table, she kind of leaned on him as she put his plate down.
What did that indicate to you?
Affection.
For speculation.
Judge,
Sustained.
did you notice anything else about their behavior that indicated to you anything about their relationship?
No.
Had you ever met Lori before that meeting?
No.
And was there another time that you interacted with Mr. Daybell?
Yes.
When do you recall that occurring?
It was September of 2019.
And what was that occasion?
I was at Lori's house to do a podcast with Lori and Melanie. And so I was there for that weekend and Chad came over.
When you said you were at Lori's house, where was that at?
It was in Rexburg.
Did you get invited to come?
Yes.
And were you in Idaho for any other reason at that point?
We had just moved my son up to Pocatello, Idaho. So I was coming up to see them and I was coming up for the Book of Mormon Evidence Conference. And then, and Melanie and Lori had been wanting to do a podcast. And so I just kind of made a weekend of it. My plan was to stay in a hotel in Idaho Falls to be in between both places. But Melanie invited me and said, Lori said, stay here. Don't need to put money in a hotel. We got an extra room for you. So.
And that was in reference to Lori's place?
Mhm.
Is that a yes for the record?
Yes.
And can you describe Lori's place that you went and stayed at, so the jury has an understanding of the layout?
It was, when you walked in, there was a living room and a kitchen, just one room, and then a stairs on the right that went up to the bedrooms and bathrooms.
And when you arrived, who do you recall being at her apartment?
Lori and Alex and Melanie.
What about children? Were there children there?
JJ.
Did you have any occasion to interact with JJ when you arrived there?
Yes, I tried a couple of times. He was sitting on the couch playing games, and so I tried to just get to know him a little bit, but he was pretty into his game.
Did he respond to you then, or?
No.
And do you have any special needs children yourself, Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I have a Down syndrome boy
Object. What's the
and with
relevance of this?
autism.
Hold on. There's a
Oh,
pending
sorry.
objection. I haven't ruled. It's
Relevance.
Judge, may I argue?
No, it's sustained, Mr. Wixom.
Okay. Did you have any further interaction with JJ at that point?
Just one more time. He had a box and he was cutting windows and doors in it, making a little toy house out of a cardboard box.
Did you try to talk to him on that occasion?
I did.
Any interaction with him then?
No.
I think you already mentioned Chad was at this meeting or gathering.
He showed up at least 2 or 3 times. He was kind of in and out.
Do you recall what span of time were you staying at Lori's apartment on this occasion?
Friday night through Monday morning.
So roughly 3 days?
Yes.
So when you said that Chad was in and out, approximately how many times was Chad coming over that you recall?
I can recall twice for sure. And it may have been a third time, but it's
When he came, how long would he stay?
maybe a half hour to an hour. It was never long.
Did you have any conversations with Chad while he was there?
Yes, I did.
And Judge, could I have some foundation as to when these meetings supposedly took place?
Wixom.
Certainly. When do you recall, the best you can by month and year, that you were at Lori's house on this occasion?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Best you can remember, can you let the jury know what month and year were you at Lori's house on this occasion?
Oh, September 2019.
And so back to the question about Chad. What do you remember talking to Chad about when he first?
Judge, again, I'm going to renew my foundation. We don't know which day of the week we're talking about since this was a 4-day weekend.
Well, I think that's more appropriate for cross, so
Okay.
it is vague, but Mr. Wixom, you can continue.
Thank you.
Appropriate for cross, so
Okay.
it is vague, but Mr. Wixom, you can continue.
Thank you. When's the first time over the course of the weekend that you can remember that Chad came over? Do you remember what day of that weekend it was?
It was the weekend, September 20 to 23 or 19 to 23 or 19 to 22. I mean, whatever that weekend was, I just remember I remember the 23rd. So
This has been 5 years ago.
yeah.
Do you remember, you said earlier that you were there from Friday to roughly Monday morning.
Yeah.
Do you remember which day of that weekend that you first recalled Chad coming over?
Saturday.
So when Chad came over, explain to the jury what, if any, conversation that you had with him at that time.
They talked about, anyway, that's when I'm trying to remember what the reason was coming over. I don't remember the intent for the reason, but we talked about that's when I learned about more of their relationship.
What did you learn?
That they were that they had been together in past lives, and that they had a mission to do together.
Did they explain at that time what that mission was together?
Yes,
What was it?
to gather the 144,000.
Did they discuss any more about their personal religious beliefs along that vein?
They just talked about terrestrial buildings that are on this earth that they can see, And
What did you understand that to mean? Did you say terrestrial or
Yeah.
terrestrial?
terrestrial.
What did you understand that to mean?
Just what it says.
Did they explain what they thought that meant?
They just said we want you to come over and we'll show it to you. So I mean, anyway,
Come over where?
it was at some park next to a church.
So did you leave the apartment and go with them?
Well, we didn't go. We just went over there and met with them there.
So you left the apartment and met them at the park?
Yes.
Who did you meet at the park?
Chad and Lori and Melanie.
And Judge, could I have some foundation as to the date or the day of the week and the time that this took place?
Mr. Wixom, it's vague. I'll overrule the objection, but it's up to you.
Do you remember which day of the weekend specifically that you would have gone to meet them at the park?
Sunday.
When you got to the park, what happened?
We just walked around the park and they described the building.
What did they describe?
About a 2-story building made of stone and arches, and that's about all I can recall.
You don't recall any specifics about the significance of the building or anything like that?
I don't.
Could you see a building the same place they were saying it was located?
No.
What did you see?
A beautiful park.
Did you perceive in any way, through your own observation, whether or not you thought Chad and Lori thought this building was there?
No.
No, you didn't perceive it?
No, I didn't perceive that. I didn't perceive that they were seeing the building. Is that what you mean?
That's my question, yes.
I'm sorry. Honestly,
Judge, non-responsive.
sorry.
Sustained.
Sir, could you tell if Chad and Lori thought the building was there?
They talked like they did, but I didn't feel any truth in it.
Hey,
Did they give you any reason why they were telling you about this or trying to show you this building?
And no, there was never really any reason explained. I think they were just trying to get my confidence,
What do you mean by that?
get me familiar with what they were doing and to
What,
get,
what was your perception about why they were trying to get you familiar with what they were doing?
my perception was at the time, I honestly didn't know what to expect. I was just kind of following along. But as I felt like they were just trying for me to be familiar with them and what they have and their gifts so that I can be confident or more. I'm not sure if I'm coming up with the right word. More of an assurance
grooming.
that what they are doing is true. Kind of like witnessing, trying to witness what they have.
Prior to walking around this park at any time on Friday or Saturday, had you expressed anything back to Chad about any of these teachings or beliefs that were being discussed?
I just talked to him about Satan and the evil spirits. They don't have that power. It's not going to be given them, and that the gathering of 144,000, that would be done by the prophet or somebody called under his authority.
Would it be fair to say that you'd explain to them that you weren't really accepting these beliefs?
Yeah.
Now, during this weekend, at any time, did you observe anything about Chad and Lori's interaction with each other that gave you any clues about the relationship?
They were more affectionate.
In what regard?
He walked up behind her and put his arms around her.
Anything else?
It's, I think there was a kiss on the cheek. There was some head rubbing.
Anything about that aspect of their relationship that bothered you that weekend?
Yes.
What was it that bothered you?
That he was still married to Tammy.
Did you ever confront him about that?
Yes.
What did you say to him?
I just asked him about, I just asked him about his marriage to Tammy, if she was, was she happy? Was he happy with her? Was she a good wife? Was she a good mother?
How'd he respond?
He said, yes, she was very good. And he said that she was good.
Anything else in that conversation specifically?
Well, it just, they said that Lori was going to be his next wife. They'd been married before and they're going to fulfill this mission together, and that he had a dream that Tammy was going to be passing by the time he was 50 or 51.
Did you have anything further that you said to him about that?
I just, not that I can recall. I know we talked more, but I can't recall I just felt uncomfortable that you'd have a call like that and you're still married.
Now, when you say a call like that, can you explain to the jury what you mean by a call like that?
The call that he was called to gather the 144,000.
So did you have any interactions with Chad that you can recall on Sunday of that weekend? I'm sorry, I'll withdraw that. After you got back from the park, did you have any further interaction with Chad that weekend?
Yes.
What was that interaction?
He said that there was 80 acres for sale over there by his place. And I have an associate that once wanted to do a development in Rexburg. And so he told me about this 80 acres that would be a good place to do it. And I just told him, I said, well, I don't have time. It's Sunday. I don't do business on Sunday, but I said, I'll go ahead and drive by it and just see if I get any vibes. And then talk to this associate of mine down in Utah about it.
What did you mean by see if you get any vibes? What did that mean?
Just to see if it felt like a good place to do a development.
As a builder, does this happen with you sometimes? Do people come?
Yes.
And then how did that interaction end when you went over and looked at the property?
Yeah, we went over there to we followed Alex over. He took us to where it was, and we just got out and we were just looking at the property and getting ready to leave. And then Chad and a guy that he was serving with in church, a realtor named Ron, they showed up.
Any more conversation with Chad while you were there at the property?
Nah, he just wanted Ron to meet me, and then Ron wanted to go over the deal, and I just said, just send me emails on it. I don't want to talk about it today.
When you were done looking at his property, did you eventually go back to Lori's apartment?
Yes.
Did you have more conversation with Chad then at the apartment?
Not that I can recall.
At any point over this weekend, did Chad ever suggest that you would have any role in this 144,000 gathering?
Yes.
When did that occur? Remember what day?
I believe that was on Saturday.
And what was that conversation?
That I was to assist him in gathering the 144,000. And that's actually when I said, well, that would be a call that would come from a prophet. And two, I knew that my life, even if that call existed, my life is not in order to be able to do something like that.
Mr. Rickson, I'm going to suggest we take our mid-afternoon break at this time, just give them time.
Certainly.
So we'll go ahead and try to come back on around quarter till, 10 till if possible, to give the jurors enough time to take a break, and we'll come back on for remaining testimony.
Certainly, Your Honor. Thanks.
All right, please.
All right, afternoon break time. So let me mute this. So yeah, his voice is a bit gravelly, and you know what it sounds to me. It's yeah, there's a lot of distancing. It sounds to me like he might have a voice, like a specific, like almost throat or voice issue, because and I've worked with people like this. In fact, one of the founders of Google had a really difficult when I worked there, had a really difficult voice to listen to because he had issues with his vocal cords, and he would talk like this. He literally sounded like Kermit the Frog, and he ended up getting surgery for it. The guy on the stand was David Warwick, Melanie Gibbs' husband, and apparently Melanie and David do not live together anymore. He lives in Utah and she lives in Arizona. Hey, Jen Lou, now that you're back, do you want to do a little breaky break? Come on up and talk at the breaky break. You're welcome to come up. So, and also, okay, I'm going to share the StreamYard link for Jen Lou. And I want to mention while I'm doing this, I saw what you said about Patricia, about giving out those things on St. Patrick's Day and saying they were from Gannon. What a lovely gesture. What an absolutely lovely celebration of Gannon. And what a sweet and thoughtful thing to do. I wanted to say that with my voice. So Jen Lou should be up here any moment now. You don't think they ever lived together? Jen says they lived together for 10 months. I thought that they lived. Yeah, David Warlock. It seems like you would want to think of it, to talk about him as David Warlock. His name definitely lends itself to that. Just also quickly before Jen Lou comes up here. Okay, I'll ask her that, Patricia. By way of an update in the Karen Reed trial. So apparently they finished today with 19 jurors, and they will have, they are not doing jury selection tomorrow. So it appears that they are not going to start with opening arguments until next Monday. So, because they still have to continue with jury selection on Wednesday. And, so probably they just don't want to start the trial, even if they do get all their jurors selected, Wednesday or Thursday, they probably just want to start on a Monday. So when that starts, we will, let me get you. Hello there.
Hey.
Hello. So, what did you think of David? Did you hear David Warwick up there?
Oh yeah, I heard him.
Yeah.
Hang on just a second. Let me let the dog in. He's snarfing at me. Just give me a sec.
Okay. Yeah, Chopper. So Monday is when the hell begins. I mean, people are already just going kind of Karen Reed crazy. I think it, again, I watched the Emily D. Baker's recap of the case, and I think it sounds to me like really the most remarkable thing about that case is that it is being federally investigated. The investigation is being investigated. So that is interesting, but I'm a little undone by how this, murder of a cop has has come to be such a national frenzy. But anyway, we aren't talking about Karen Reed now. We're back on Daybell.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what were your thoughts on David Warwick?
Well, David, in my opinion, I want to be very clear about this because I don't want Lynn to get any potential backlash. But David, in my opinion, does a lot of the same thing that Melanie Gibb does. So to really understand this, you have to understand okay, he's using the term meetings, okay? And I mean, they are in the very, loosest sense of the word. They are meetings are nothing more than a bunch of people gathering in one spot to speak about something, right? So yes, they are meetings, but these meetings are way outside of what would ever be sanctioned by or approved by or looked or the LDS church would have would be like, oh great, you're doing this is fantastic. Okay, these are not those. These would be like these kinds of meetings could get you potentially in big trouble with the church.
Well,
Okay.
right, like Chad was already excommunicated, and so were others in that group.
Well, Chad's excommunication, it took a while for that to come, but he did eventually get excommunicated. But you're right, like these were not. So he does this distancing because it's my understanding, and I might be wrong about David, but I know Melanie is, but they're still part of the mainstream LDS church.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of the reason why they speak about it in the way that they do.
Yeah.
Because when you're excommunicated from the church, it's a huge deal. Yep. It not only impacts you, it impacts your family, all of your family.
Well, and I think that's what Melanie was talking about in her text to Rob Wood when she said something about, when she said, oh, I want to protect the church. She really meant, I want to protect myself from getting excommunicated from the church.
Correct.
Yeah.
I want to protect Melanie is all about Melanie. She does not give a rat's fattening cap about anybody but herself. Period. The end.
Right.
But
and I agree with you that David has a very same, almost exact agenda. And I agree with Chopper that it's a lot like Scientology. You not only get excommunicated from the church, you get shunned from your friends and family, the people who choose to stay.
Yes, because getting excommunicated from the LDS church is a process.
Right.
Now, depending on your situation. So take, for example, Jodi Arias and why can't I think of his name? Travis. They were not allowed for a period of time because it was found out that they were having a physical relationship outside of the confines of marriage. So they were not allowed to visit the temple. So there are different levels to like getting in trouble with the church, and some things you can come back from and some things you cannot. And so what David is saying in a lot of this testimony, like going out to that field, okay, a lot of the things that occur in the LDS faith rely on witnessing. It's like it's one of the foundations of their faith.
Yes.
And it's not there doesn't count as a witness if it's you God and Jesus. Okay, that doesn't count. You have to have other people there
Right.
to witness what it is. And so I think what David is trying to do is explain it in a way, but not tie tenets of the LDS faith into it.
Right.
See, the LDS Church has very publicly tried to really separate themselves from this situation.
They did.
Much like they've done in other cases. If you guys have ever seen, if you haven't, you should watch it. It's a book, but it's called Under the Banner of Heaven, and it's on Hulu. And that show really explains it very, very well. So that's really what David is doing. He's, it's not okay with the LDS Church if you start exploring things that are outside of what their strict teachings are. And I mean strict like by the books. You know what I mean? I don't mean like they are strict, but like just strictly follow the tenets of faith.
Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people are recognizing that there are lots of different groups like offshoots of LDS, Jehovah's Witness, Scientology, that operate in similar ways. And I'm here to say that any group or religion or practice or whatever that exerts more and more and more control over their members, that's where you start to have to mark that as a red flag. Why do they have to have so much control over me? Why are they trying to control things that really you can't control, like people's thoughts, right?
Right.
People's relationships. And, to me, there are varying degrees of cults. There are channels on YouTube that behave like cults, but they don't have every element of a cult, right?
Right.
It's really about how the group is structured, what the values and mores of the group is, what the leader brings on, and things like that. And control is, the more a group wants to assert control, the more cultish it is. And the more abusive they get and the more coercive they get, the more abusive, the more cultish it is. So all this to say that, like, if you recognize the same kinds of behaviors, coercive control behaviors in a group, and you're saying, well, they're not LDS and they're not, Scientology, it doesn't matter. It's really more about the behavioral dynamics of the group itself, regardless of what they're tied to.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. And the thing about here's the thing though, with this specific church, the LDS Church,
Mm-hmm.
It isn't like when Chad started this offshoot that he then denounced his LDS faith. He didn't leave the LDS Church, and that's very important to remember.
No, he wanted it to be sanctioned by LDS.
Correct.
Yeah.
He wanted it to be sanctioned, and there are tenets of the LDS faith that the LDS that are no longer practiced, but they don't want to talk about ever. And polygamy is one.
Yeah.
And the reason they don't want to talk about it, and this is where there becomes a conflict between mainstream LDS and fundamentalist groups like FLDS and the like.
Right.
It is because it is a tenet of faith that Joseph Smith, who is the founder of the Mormon religion, spoke about. And according to Joseph Smith, it is a requirement of your faith to live polygamy. And the reason that polygamy is no longer practiced in the in the LDS religion is not because it's not a healthy environment for anybody involved. That's not why it is. They don't practice it because it's against the law in the United States.
Yeah,
And they
because it was outlawed. And that's why some segments, they moved to other areas of the United States where it was still legal, or they moved to Mexico or Canada.
Correct. And
Yeah.
so to be a mainstream LDS church member, and you are not allowed to associate at all with these offshoots. Part of what happened with that book, Under the Banner of Heaven, is that it started out very differently. It started out because they were the family was very upset about the taxes, and that it started out about money. But the more research the one of the sons in the family did, the more he started discovering tenets of the faith that the mainstream LDS church removed themselves from, and he became disenfranchised. And he felt that the LDS church wasn't living really the true what Joseph Smith wanted the church to live. I suppose the way to explain it would be similar to like when Moses got the 10 Commandments, and then all of a sudden nobody was paying attention to the 10 Commandments. You know what I'm saying? So it was a big deal. And that's what happens. They become disenfranchised and they break off into these sects. But if you are a mainstream Mormon LDS and you associate with anybody, no matter how brief the encounter is, particularly the fundamentalists, the FLDS, if you're caught speaking to them, it's huge. You're in big trouble.
Yep.
That's almost grounds for immediate removal from the church.
I'm trying to remember. I took a long time in that rabbit hole when all this came out, this case, and there was new information about the FLDS that was coming out at that time. I went deep into that rabbit hole. And you're right. It's worse for them to be connecting and talking to, and I'm trying to remember what the word is for it that they have, but it's worse to associate with an ex religion, with an ex LDS member, or not just an ex LDS member, civilian, but an ex LDS member that goes to an offshoot. And
it's apostasy is what word they use.
Exactly. That's right. That's the word I was looking for. Apostasy. Apostates. So if you were in the religion and you left, they are verboten. And that's like with Scientology. With Scientology, if a person was in and then they're out, they are a suppressive person. Right? And you're not supposed to associate with them.
Correct.
But if they've always been out, and it really depends on their actions whether they're a suppressive person or not.
Right. And you can see in this testimony that for the mainstream LDS church, you don't do anything on Sunday. You go to church and you spend the rest of the day with your family. You don't go out shopping. You don't do business. And you can see that David Warwick is making that very clear in his testimony. I don't do business on Sundays. Have him email me. And something about that does not ring true to me. And here's why. If he said that and he was firm in that, right, then why did Chad bring the real estate person, or the guy that was, the real estate agent out? That's a problem. And because doing something like that is a passive aggressive move, right? And yet David describes Chad as meek.
Yeah.
So this is my issue with the inner circle, with the cast and crew of the what did I call it earlier? Oh, the casting and chilling sessions. Not everybody that they spoke to was invited to these. Not everybody they spoke to was inner circle.
Right.
And while Um, if you just look at it in like just a little bit, you know, it's very easy to say, well, you know, Chad had everybody surrounding Lori dictated as dark. Well, that's not true, because Melanie Boudreau was extremely close to Lori, and she wasn't designated dark. I don't think that Chad's intention was to ever isolate her from her family.
Well, it depended on how bought into his teachings they all were. And Melanie, by all accounts, Melanie Boudreau was bought in.
I think that, well, my point was more that Lori already was sort of disconnected from her family. They were not all that close like that.
Right.
So it wasn't like Chad really had to do much. Do you know what I'm saying? And he didn't label her parents dark. I think only Adam got labeled dark, if I'm remembering correctly, but that's because Adam
he took Charles's side.
Correct.
Yeah. So they, in my view, they only labeled people dark when they got in the way of Chad and Lori in some way, shape, or form.
Correct.
And we were talking about earlier how, if you notice, no one in Chad's family got labeled dark except Tammy.
Right.
And bada bing, bada boom, she's gone.
Right. And I still have a lot of questions surrounding that. Like there was a part in David's testimony just now where he talks about meeting Tammy for the first time and that she didn't seem interested in this stuff. But he also talks about confronting Chad about this inappropriate, overly affectionate relationship that he had with Lori.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was more to that conversation. I have always, and I didn't base this on just something. If you watch Hidden True Crime podcast, they do an interview with Heather Daybell, which is Chad Daybell's sister-in-law.
Yeah.
And she speaks a great deal about her thoughts on it. And before she even made the connection all the way, it was in the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
There is part of me that wonders if this was not going to be some type of plural marriage situation between Lori and Tammy, and that the reason it went the way that it did is because Lori would have been the second wife, because Chad was never going to formally divorce Tammy. And when you are the second wife, you have no rights. Like, you know, I don't mean in their religion, but I'm just meaning like legally.
Legal rights. Rights.
You have nothing. So if something happened to Chad, Lori wouldn't be entitled to anything. Right. And I don't think that sat quite right with Miss Lori. And I think that Lori and Chad, I think that they pushed each other to do things and called it, you know, this will prove your love to me. Yeah. And I think sacrifices in every sense of the word were made. I think Charles was the first. I think Tylee was the second. I think JJ was the third on Lori's behalf, for Lori's part. I think Tammy was Chad's sacrifice. And I think had they not been stopped, there would have been more.
Hell yeah.
I don't know that Chad's children would have all made it out. I think eventually at least a couple of them would have been labeled dark.
That is maybe eventually, but it might have taken a while. But
yes.
Have you ever watched the Mormon Stories podcast?
I watch them all. I watch John Dehlin all the time. He's one of my favorites.
That's one of the rabbit holes I went down because, you know, so for any of you who aren't aware, there's this podcast called Mormon Stories. This guy, John Dehlin, has been doing these podcasts for quite some time. He has a foundation. He has an organization. He's a foreman. He's a former LDS who has been excommunicated. And, you know, LDS was a major, major part of his life. and he tells the entire story about how he was excommunicated and the process. He goes into great detail about the process of being excommunicated and what it meant and who he had to talk to and his family and who he was going to be losing in his family and who he wasn't. He's married. He has kids. I mean, it was a very, very big deal. He had position in the church, you know, in the ward. So I do recommend that channel if you're interested in any of this, because he also he does interview people from this case and other cases as well.
Yes.
He interviewed somebody connected to Jody Hildebrandt. Maybe it was her niece or something like that. I forget.
Yes. Yes, it was her niece. He also interviewed Adam Scott, who also had interaction with Jody Hildebrandt. He went to her, he and his wife, when they were first married, and his
Right.
story actually goes back. Adam's story goes back farther than that. Adam is part of the original Boy Scouts of America scandal
Oh gosh.
and the LDS Church.
You know what? I saw that. I remember that. Yep. You know who else he interviewed, which was a really good and interesting interview, was Heather from Housewives of Salt Lake City.
Oh, yes. Yes.
That was such a great interview because I don't know, it was really nice to hear her talking about what it's like to be on a show, you know, and have grown up and then become part of a reality show. Not that I, you know, love that whole reality show scene that they're in. It's very entertaining, but it's so toxic, you know.
Yes, it is.
And but anyway, it's just a really good.
And he's very good at first of all, I believe that he's also a psychologist.
Yeah, he's very educated. He's very knowledgeable.
Yes. Yeah. And he does a fantastic job because there are words that means that we use. Obviously, a witness, we know what that word means if you're not in the LDS faith, but to understand, he's really great at explaining what these different things mean. And when people say something, what they're talking about, you know,
right.
And I went down this rabbit hole with this case, but I went down a rabbit hole with the Mormons a very, very long time ago, like when I was still pregnant with Minnie Bindi. And and she's, you know, going to be 19 this year, if y'all can believe that. But yeah, so it's interesting to hear some of the stuff. And there are times when I was listening to David testify, and the prosecutor is saying, you know, could you explain what that means? And I'm like, I look up and I'm thinking, why does he need to? But that's because most people don't understand. And then it kind of scared me that I do. So
right.
I was like,
whoa. No, exactly. Well, that we've talked about. Oh, they're back in court.
I'll be down in chat.
Thanks
for having me,
Lynn.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
All right, I believe we can have the jurors brought back in, please.
I was starting to say, you know, we have been talking about how just one of the reasons I love court is because you get to see people not in the court context when you've usually seen them in a completely different context. So and that is the case here with the church, right? Because now you're trying to take all this coded language from a huge system of beliefs and translate that into court, into answering simple questions for testimony. And I shared the link to Jen's the Word Case Studies channel. So scroll up to check out that channel and please subscribe to it. She's also streaming this, I think, in the mornings. I'm not sure exactly what her schedule is, but she's been covering this and heavily covering the Letitia Stout case. And her and Alex Erickson have been playing jail calls from Letitia Stout, which have been, by all accounts, very interesting. I just don't follow them real closely because I haven't followed that case real closely. And at some point when I get a lull in my time from covering cases, stream in the morning, recaps at night. There you go.
Here's all further account for Your Honor. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, we're back on the record on CR 22-21-1623, State of Idaho versus Chad Guy Daybell. Parties are present as well as the defense. Mr. Warwick's on the stand. I'll remind you, you're still under oath for your testimony. Mr. Wixom, continuing on direct examination. You may proceed, Mr. Wixom.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Warwick, I want to draw your attention back to that Sunday afternoon and evening after you looked at the property. When you came back, did you have any other interaction at all with JJ?
No.
Did you see him in the apartment that day?
I believe he was there Sunday afternoon when we came back.
Thinking back to the last time that you saw JJ, when was it that day? What time of day was it?
It was probably about 10:30 at night.
And what do you recall seeing him doing when you last saw him?
Alex came in the front door and JJ had JJ in his arms and he carried him upstairs and put him to bed. And JJ, was asleep. So
now, at some point in that evening, did you do a podcast?
yeah, we did that Sunday night.
About what time of night, best you can recall?
And we started like 7:30 and we were just finishing it up when Alex brought JJ home.
And who all was at the podcast and participating?
Melanie and Lori and myself.
Was Chad there at that time?
No.
And where in the apartment did you do the podcast?
In Lori's kitchen.
So was the podcast happening before you saw Alex bring JJ in and take him upstairs?
Yes.
And then you slept in that apartment that night, correct?
Yes.
About what time did you go to bed?
Probably 11 o'clock, 11:30, right in there.
To the best that you understood, who else was at the apartment that night?
Lori and Melanie, JJ and myself.
I don't think I asked this before, but at any point during the weekend, did you ever see Tylee at the apartment?
No,
Ever see her around anywhere?
no.
When you got up the next morning, did you have any more interactions with Lori?
Yes.
And what were those interactions?
We came downstairs. I came downstairs getting ready to leave for Pocatello. So I just went to say goodbye to Lori and JJ. And Lori was in the kitchen and she was a little dramatic. And I just said, well, we're leaving. I'd like to say goodbye to JJ. And she said, oh, he was out of control. And I had to have Alex come and get him.
So, Mr. Warwick, other than what she said, you just used the word dramatic. What did you mean by that?
She just seemed really talking fast and nervous, just kind of When I meant dramatic, she explained that he climbed up on the cabinets in the fridge and got on top of the upper cabinets, and it just her explanation of how JJ was acting was what I would say was dramatic.
Was it different than your other interactions with Lori?
Yeah.
Did she say anything else about him climbing up on the cabinets? JJ?
No, she had a picture of Christ on the upper cabinet, and he said that he went up there and pushed that down.
Now, did that seem accurate to you, her account of what had happened with JJ climbing on the cabinets?
No,
Why not?
because I didn't see any broken parts on the cabinet. I didn't see any scuffs on the fridge, and the crown on the top. If he would have got up there, that crown would have just pulled off.
Is cabinet crowning something you're familiar with as a builder?
Yes.
Did you get a close observation of the crown on the cabinet then?
Yeah.
Did you say anything about this to Lori?
No, I just said, well, I'd like, she said that he was having a possession attack. And so I said, well, I'd really like to see him. And she said, no, Alex has got him and he's taking care of him.
When she said he's having a possession attack, did she say anything else about that aspect of it?
No, just just can handle it.
You want to have this one moment, please?
Yes.
No, I don't believe I have any more questions at this time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Wixom. Mr. Pryor, cross-examination.
Okay, Mr. Pryor. Let's go Pryor with the Pryor.
Good afternoon. Mr. Warwick, you previously mentioned that you were married to Melanie Gibb.
Yes.
Okay, what was the date of the marriage?
December 10th, 2020.
Close and around the time of all of these occurrences, would that be fair?
Yes. Well, a year later, I guess.
Okay. And when did you first meet Miss Gibb?
At a conference that at UVU.
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to remember the date.
That's okay. Just take your time. We're not in a hurry.
Okay. Met her at a conference. I think it was I don't remember the year. It's probably 2012 or 2013 or 14, somewhere in there.
Okay. And then approximately when did the two of you start dating?
We started in August of 2019.
Now, at the time, you had mentioned that it sort of offended you that Mr. Daybell was married and was seeing someone even though he was still legally married, right?
Well, in relation to the things that they were, like the beliefs that they were, didn't match up.
The beliefs didn't match up.
Well, what they were saying they were doing about their calling and then seeing each other
Okay.
didn't match up. That's,
Inconsistent.
yeah, it's
he
you
was
just,
having- I'm sorry.
yeah, nope, I'm done. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
I'm done.
Okay. So what he was preaching wasn't consistent with the way he was acting. Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay, but at the time you started dating Miss Gibb, you were still married too, weren't you?
Yeah, my divorce was just getting finalized.
Okay. But you started dating her while you were still legally married, weren't you?
Well, I made the mistake. I thought I was doing the 30-day waiver
Okay.
on, for the time.
Mhm.
And, but I didn't understand that the judge needed another 60 days after the 30 days. And I'd already paid for two plane tickets to have some time with her in August with my son, Nicholas. And so we just went forward and went, and did those two things for August.
So in other words, you traveled, so when you met her in August of 2019, you were already planning on going on a vacation with her, is that right?
No, not a vacation.
What was it?
One was, the Zion, it was called the Zion's Camp. It's a kind of educational camp.
Okay,
And I wanted to see how she would do with my son, Nicholas.
okay. And
I was taking care of my son, Nicholas. That was the whole reason for the divorce, because my wife at the time, it was too much. We had him with us for several weeks. And so I don't have time. I don't know how much time you want for the details, but that was the whole motivation was,
you divorced your wife because she wasn't taking proper care of your son, Nicholas, and it's all about Nicholas, right?
no, we mutually agreed. We
Okay.
did not want a divorce, but
I-
but we needed to get Nicholas out of the home that he was in because he was suffering some abuses there.
Okay,
If you'd like to go into more, I'd be happy to.
we don't have to.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't
That's
want to go
fine,
into this
okay.
much, but I just wanted to clarify a few things that were of a concern, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Now, I do want to talk a little bit about an organization called the Seven Gatherers. You're familiar with that, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay. And to your knowledge, your wife isn't a member of the Seven Gatherers, right?
I don't know anything about Seven Gatherers.
Okay, thank you.
I've never heard of the Seven Gatherers. Has anyone in chat heard of the Seven Gatherers?
Now, both of you go to various camps and conferences and meetings and speak about religious subjects. Is that fair?
Yes,
And both of you have I don't want to use the term expertise, a knowledge of certain areas of religious beliefs. Would that be fair?
yes.
And your particular area of knowledge is in what?
It's about, there was the conversion, my conversion to Christ and his church, and the gifts and dreams and visions that came afterwards.
Okay. So when we talk about that, let's cut this down a little bit to really what we're, so these folks understand. It's really about, you go to these camps in rural, these fireside chats is what they're talking about or mentioned as, correct? Fireside chats?
Yes, I would be a speaker at the fireside, one of the firesides at the camp.
And the subject that you would discuss would be visions that you have that you would want to translate to them and talk to these people at these fireside chats about these various visions and experiences, premonitions that you have.
No, it was about my conversion and the faith, and then the fruits of that faith.
Oh, you've
It
never,
was to build faith. It
Oh.
was the dreams and visions were not necessarily discussed at the camps in much detail. There's many aspects to dreams and visions about many topics. So it was about, the whole purpose was to help inspire people to seek God,
Okay.
to seek his truth, in relationship with the Holy Ghost bearing witness of that truth.
Okay. So the fact that you experience these visions and you have these visions, that's not necessarily what you're talking to these people about, but you do in fact have made various representations about visions that you've had over the years. Is that right?
Yes,
And some of these visions have included being invaded by foreign powers, right?
yes.
Objection relevance, Your Honor.
It's a late objection. It's already been answered. You can
I'm sorry,
table
Judge, I missed that.
I overruled the objection because it wasn't timely.
Okay, all right, thank you, Judge. And some of these visions deal with religious matters as well.
Yes,
And that's something that you've gone to conferences to speak about as well, right?
and aspects.
Right,
They're just
okay.
depending on the topics and then whatever I felt right in my heart that was allowed to be.
And really, it's your experience in your it's your experience in your LDS faith that you're trying to communicate with these people and talk about these conversions and things that you've experienced as part of your understanding of your LDS faith. Is that-
Objection, Your Honor. Rule 610.
Judge, could we approach and have a sidebar?
Yes.
Sidebar. Judge, do you think we can have a sidebar?
Okay, that's okay. Okay, okay, right? Okay, right? Okay, right? Right? Okay, okay. Okay.
Your Honor, I would like to sidebar here. Is this, Your Honor, sidebar?
Sidebar. So Pryor is getting into the visions or the quote unquote premonitions that David Warwick has, because David Warwick also talks about having these visions. And so it sounds to me like the direction that Pryor is trying to go. That's why I only showed a very quick clip. Great Dane Mom. I think he's trying to push this in the direction of, well, Chad says he has visions. You have visions. Why are your visions good and Chad's visions bad? Right? And also, he's trying to bring up that, well, you were married when you met Melanie, and Chad and Lori were married when they met each other. And that is like a complete, very overbroad pushing together of those two circumstances, which are totally different, right? At least as far as we know, this guy was already well into his divorce proceedings. Chad and Lori not only were fully married, but they didn't tell either of their spouses that they were carrying on with another person, and they were making all these massive spiritual proclamations about their lifetime together while they each had spouses at home having no idea. sorry Great Dane Mom, I try not to do that again. While the other spouses have no idea, they were being incredibly deceptive. So I think the general idea here, and if we are to believe what David and Melanie say, is that David and Melanie weren't being deceptive to other people when they got together and hooked up and became a couple. Lori and Chad were being deceptive in a multitude of ways. Who was too honorable for that, Patricia? So Chad and Lori were betraying their children, their spouses. They were plotting and planning murders. And, you know, at least from David's perspective as a witness, and at that time, what he saw were these two people who were carrying on a full-on relationship, knowing that Tammy Daybell is still in existence and she's still alive and she's at home thinking that she's still married to her husband. And they're planning this entire future together. Lori and Chad are planning this entire future together where they together are going to save the world as these translated beings. And so, you know, it does stretch credulity to believe that these two people who basically decided that it was God's plan for them to be together, to just discard all these family members and start using bastardized pretenses or premises from the LDS religion to come up with charts that determine certain people are dark and certain people are have redeeming qualities, are light. Oh boy, it's a limerick. Patricia's come up with another limerick. There once was a woman named Lana who shouted 3 million words just to garner the attention and lust of a girl who was just trying to tell her she just didn't want her. Exactly. And how many times over has that happened? Anyway, David absolutely disapproved. And I think that what I've noticed about his testimony is that whether we like him or not, whether we like his teachings or his claims or not, he is being consistent in his testimony. Like I remember his testimony from the preliminary hearing where he testified. I remember his testimony from Lori's trial, and it's been completely consistent. And he's never he's never made a big deal out of not believing in any of this stuff. It's been pretty much made clear through what Melanie, his wife, has said, that he wasn't buying it. He wasn't totally buying it. And I think he was influencing Melanie to a certain extent, or maybe Melanie would have been further into things. She would have been even further than I think she already was into things, without David being around. Like, I feel like Melanie was in a quandary because she had these friends who had these radical beliefs and she was kind of moving in that direction, but she was also being influenced by this guy, and she respected him, and he's saying this is all a bunch of BS. And I think so Melanie really had to kind of straddle fences there, and any of her public remarks had to acknowledge the fact that you could tell that she was fully embracing this these cultish beliefs at points in her life, but also trying to distance herself from it at the same time to kind of serve her loyalty to David. Does that make sense to you all? There once was a man who could ski. He bumped into the famous Gwynny. He tried to impress, but made quite a mess because his ego was out of its tree. That one went over my head, and I'm probably he bumped into the that's about the man, the trial about Gwyneth Paltrow. I covered that trial. Man, oh man. Okay, it looks like they're coming back to the stand. We love your
All right, council, we are back on the record on CR 22-21-1623. The court had a sidebar to make an evidentiary ruling outside presence of the jurors. I sustained an objection and I'll ask the jurors to disregard the previous question. Mr. Pryor, if you'd like to continue with your cross, you may.
So it looks like he can't keep.
So, Mr. Warwick, we were on the subject of visions, and that you explained to me that these visions are only a small part of what you lecture at these fireside mountain retreats and at these conferences and at these meetings. Is that fair?
Yes.
And part of these visions is consistent with your faith, right?
Yes.
So if you were to have these various visions about certain events, that's not something that's particularly inconsistent with your faith, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if Chad Daybell were to have visions of certain events, that's not necessarily inconsistent with his faith either, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I want to talk to you a little bit because I'm a little unclear.
I understand the term, but I don't understand the context.
Okay, the context is in a religious context, that you get some sort of feedback that has a religious perspective to it. So in that context, do you understand or have had familiarity with that process?
Yes.
Okay, what is that experience or knowledge that you have as it relates to vibrations?
It's so
Not understanding what you're after, Mr. Pryor.
Yeah.
Okay, well, in a religious context, you know, have you participated in meetings or gatherings that dealt with the subject of vibrations?
No.
You haven't.
No.
Has your wife gone on seminars and spoke about, while you were there, about this theory and idea of vibrations?
Not that I recall.
Okay. All right.
Pryor's really.
Then what is your wife's been as well has been called to a number of places to speak as well as a guest at a number of places, correct?
Yes.
And she's similar topics, but hers has a little bit of a slant. What's her area of knowledge?
Hers is more about believing and overcoming unbelief.
Okay, and be more specific if you could.
Okay.
Like in what way? Overcoming non-belief? What do you mean?
What's the why is he asking?
Well, she did health. Actually, hers was more on health. The ones that I've seen, because she does foot reflexology.
Okay.
And teaches about the body, and it works with the nerves through the feet.
Okay. All right.
Because a lot of the speaking things that she had done, I was not involved with. A lot of that had happened before we got together.
And the items that she would talk about.
I'd never witnessed what she spoke about.
By the way, Mr. Warwick, please don't just interject in the
Sorry.
response in the middle of anyone else talking. It's difficult for the court reporter.
And Mr. Warwick, I'm going to be guilty of that too a couple of times. So we'll try to be patient with each other. Okay.
Okay.
So when you say before you met her, she's been speaking about religious topics before you folks even met, right?
Yes.
And you guys met again when?
Officially, we met the end of May 2019.
Okay. But unofficially, you met well before that in what, 2012?
Yeah, she was with an line of people, and they just came up to tell me that they appreciated the talk that I gave. That was it.
And prior to May of 2019, it was she engaged in the same sort of speaking circuit. She would go to these fireside retreats and she would do these conferences. well before she ever met Chad Daybell, right?
Yeah, but she wasn't, from my understanding, she was not a speaker for years. She just they organized some podcast. I can't remember the name of it right now. Anyway, and that's what they were mainly doing, was podcast. I never recall I'd ever seen her speak at any of these events.
So she would organize these events and she would sort of gather these people and bring the groups together to talk about these various religious subjects, right?
Religious and health and child, raising children. There was multiple things that she's let me know that she's been doing.
Which one of you talked at these preparedness camps about and you know what I'm talking about, these preparedness camps that you would go up to, right? And what exactly were they preparing for?
Oh, they just basically teaching you how to different ways to be self-reliant through growing food, have energy, and it was any topic to be prepared, so that when tribulations, or you're able to provide and be able to do better serve. There's all kinds of things about how to cook and how to set up camps, all kinds of.
You weren't teaching about cooking, right?
What's that?
You weren't teaching about cooking, right?
Nope.
You weren't teaching.
I didn't teach. I just gave a fireside. I just shared my story of my conversion.
And your visions to some extent.
To some extent, there'd be some that would come up, but not much on a camp like that.
About some of the things that you predicted that would happen in the future, right?
Not that I'd predict. Not it was what I was shown.
Oh, I'm sorry. I made a mistake there.
Yeah, it's not me.
Right. It's not you that are making these. They aren't predictions. They're, and please forgive me. You put the right word on it. They're premonitions about things that you saw that you believe you need to share with other people. Is that fair?
No.
They're visions of things that you see that are brought to you some way and that you believe are things that would occur in the future. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've heard the term light and dark. Are you familiar with those terms?
Yes.
Light and dark, would you agree with me that the term light and dark are synonymous with the words good and evil?
Yeah. Yes.
They could be interchanged.
Yes.
And it just depends really on your how you're brought up, what terms your family's using. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Some families will say, this is good and this is evil. Other families would say, this is light and this is dark. Would you agree with that?
I've never heard the light and dark explained that way. I've always heard that they just say this is good and evil.
Okay.
I've never heard explained the way you just said it.
Okay, but you've heard the terms light and dark,
Mm-hmm.
and the light and dark term is in at least your faith is referenced a number of times in your faith.
Yes.
We can go back and show you if you're aware of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So that's not a foreign term to you, the term light and dark, right?
Right.
Okay, that's part of your faith, right?
It's part of life.
Right. All right. Well,
I wasn't raised, I didn't have faith, and I knew about light and dark way before faith.
okay. And Mr. Daybell and you share at least the same faith generally in the beginning, right?
Yes.
And Mr. Daybell would be familiar with the term light and dark. He's spoken to you about that, right?
Yes.
Okay. But the area that I'm confused is the area called portals. Have you heard that term?
Yes.
Okay. And was teaching about dark portals, was that something your wife would ever do?
I don't know. I never heard her teach.
Okay. So you don't know if she's teaching anybody about a dark portal or a light portal or any kind of portal, right?
Right.
Okay. Judge, this might be a place where we can gather up again. It's up to the court. I can either go on or whatever the court prefers.
All right, I know it feels like we've had breaks today, but I'm pretty committed to keeping our jurors on the schedule that we've determined. So we are going to take our break for the day, we'll conclude and continue on with further cross tomorrow. Before we conclude, just a few things. Mr. Warwick, I'll be asking you again in the morning if you've reviewed any of this trial testimony or anything. So you're still subject to that exclusionary order. For the jurors, again, the admonishment, please don't do anything to review or investigate the case in any way. If you see any news coverage, footage, et cetera, don't try to avert your attention from that, I should say. Don't discuss the case or the evidence amongst yourselves or with anyone else. You can only do that once your deliberations have begun. And with that, I appreciate your attentiveness today. We're going to go ahead and recess for the evening, and we'll begin again tomorrow morning again at 8:30 as well. All right, we're in recess.
All right, that's okay. Okay. Right? Okay. Right? Okay. Right? Okay.
Okay. Okay. So that was an interesting day of testimony. It was nice to see Colby, honestly, because he actually looked pretty good. And I was relieved that his testimony didn't have to be too emotional or dramatic for him. You know what I mean? It was a pretty straightforward testimony. And yes, he did get emotional at the beginning, but it was short-lived and they were able to get past it. And Pryor didn't really badger him, really that I could see. I feel like there's a heavy focus. Excuse me, hold on a second. Yeah, that's right. That's a good point, Jen Lou. There is that would have brought more emotion into it. In Lori's trial, they played a extremely emotional, heavy phone call between Colby and Lori. And I can understand why it wasn't played in this trial today, because it's between Colby and Lori, not with Chad. And oops, hold on. And I don't even recall any mentions of Chad in that conversation. But don't take my word for that. So it was just nice to see. And then they very quickly went through a couple of other just timeline establishment witnesses, the babysitter and the school principal. And then we have David Warwick. And I think, as I was starting to say earlier, they're really, they being Pryor, the defense, are really pushing for, this is in the Lori Melanie camp, right? There was a little Colby called him Peter Griffin. Oh, I didn't remember that. Colby called him Peter Griffin? I didn't remember that. So, Jen Lou, what time is your recap? Well, we're waiting for Jen Lou to answer that question. Just if you weren't here earlier when I gave you the update on Karen Reed trial. So apparently they will not be back in jury selection tomorrow. They have one more alternate to seat. They'll be back in jury selection on Wednesday, and they anticipate starting that trial on next Monday. So, and 9 p.m. EST, Eastern Standard Time. There will be a trial recap on Jen Liu's channel. That's her channel. And just as a reminder here, if you would like to support me and my channel, always appreciated, never expected. And also members, be sure to check out my community post about the mental health panel that I want to have. And I'll be talking more about the mental health panel soon. Something maybe that you and Alex might be interested in, Jen. So we can talk about that later. But anyway, I do appreciate you all being here, for you all being respectful in chat. And I love spending time with you here, watching these trials. And I do hope that you all have a wonderful, I just did Great Dane Mom. I just did it right above. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Okay. Bye.